and the Caribbean Bureau of ISA. He's a national of Curacao. He's fluent in Dutch, English, Spanish, Papimento, and has a working understanding of French. I heard someone say German too. I'm not sure. Prior to joining ISOC, Mr. Regional Relations of the Caribbean for ICANN for more than 3 years. Before ICANN, he worked as a policy advisor with the Telecommunications and Post Regulatory Authority in the Netherlands Antilles for almost 6 years. Previously, he worked with the local telecommunications incumbent operator, UTS, CITAL, in Curacao for almost 9 years. This is someone with a lot of experience in internet society, in cyber security, and has a lot of knowledge to share about the ABCs of cybersecurity. Would you put your hands together as we welcome Mr. Osepa?
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I think after we have heard at Bevel's presentation, so can you bring it here? Okay, it's fine. We will proceed with that. Can you guys hear me? Yes, okay. So I think after we have heard at Bevel's presentation, I still think we need a message of hope, right? Because it was very scary and it seems like there is no hope. But there is hope. But we need to get ourselves educated. We need to get ourselves acquainted with what is going on. And based on that, I think we are able to address the challenges that we are facing. What I would like to talk with you is to focus a bit on what we call the ABCs of cybersecurity. So I would like to give you an overview. Basically, Bevel already did highlight most of them, but I would like to give you, let's say, a structure of what we are talking about. And based on that, you can use that as a point of departure as we go along today and tomorrow as well. Where should I point, right? Can I go to the next slide, please? So maybe you can just, the next one, yes. To talk with you a bit on the internet society, given that we are here, it works now? Yes, I would like to talk with you a bit on the internet society, given that this is an internet society's event, internet society's chapters. I would like to give you a better understanding what is internet society, what we are doing. And then I would like to highlight also what we call the Internet 3 operational layers. This is very important for us to understand when we are talking about the internet, what we are talking about. I'll be focusing a bit then on what we call cybersecurity threats that we are seeing globally and give you some themes and solutions, how we can address all these challenges that we are facing. And finally, there will be a possibility for you to ask questions as well. Internet Society was formed in 1992 by these two persons. Can someone maybe tell me who are these persons? No? As a member of the Internet Society, you should know this. Second? Yes, the first guy is, I've heard the first guy is Vincent, and the second guy, who is that? That's Bob Ken. So basically, these two persons, they developed what we call the TCP protocol on which the internet is based. So the internet that we're using nowadays, these are the pioneers of that protocol, the TCP protocol. And in 1992, they came together. They were discussing how can we continue to have a structural way how we can promote the internet and also to focus on education and capacity building. And they formed the Internet Society back then. Internet Society is a global organization, and we are focusing on three main things. The first one would be what we call Internet standards development. You may have heard of IPv4, IPv6, autonomous system numbers. All these are, let's say, standards that are being used in order for us to use the internet. So Internet Society, through what we call the Internet Engineering Task Force, is developing all these internet-related standards. There are other organizations that are focusing on other standards, but in Internet Society, through the Internet Engineering Task Force, is focusing only on internet-related standards. Those of you who are using, for example, GSM technology, that's also a standard, but it's not really a internet-related standard. And you have all kinds of other standards. The second area that Internet Society focuses on is what we call policy development. And in this regard, it's not only policy with respect to, let's say, technical internet matters, but also on other areas, such as freedom of speech, and how can you maintain an open internet and all these kind of discussions. So you will find Internet Society's view when we are dealing with these global, let's say, policy discussions. And the third area is what we call capacity building and education. What we are doing today can be considered as part of capacity building and education. So in a nutshell, that's basically what Internet Society is doing. And we do have local chapters that are, let's say, I know especially in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, people are believers, and you may consider that as a church, right? So you may have the global church, and then you may have local churches to, let's say, to proclaim, let's say, the message in this. I would not say use the word gospel, but to proclaim the message in this particular case. So basically, that's what Internet Society in a nutshell is doing. And again, I would like to congratulate the local chapter for organizing this event. So the Internet three operational layers. I believe this is a very important slide because nowadays, when you ask someone what is the Internet, most people would answer things such as Facebook, right? But the Internet goes beyond Facebook. So that is why it's very important for us to understand what we call the three operational layers of the Internet. First of all, we need a telecommunication infrastructure, be it wired, wireless, satellite communication, Wi-Fi, doesn't matter. We need a telecommunications infrastructure. And once we have a telecommunication infrastructure in place, then we go to the next level where we have all these internet standards. I already did mention, for example, Vincent from Bobcan, they did develop the TCP protocol on which the internet is based. So then we are talking on that level, the domain name systems level. And when you have that technical infrastructure of the internet up and running, and then we move to the highest level where we as human beings interact with the internet. So here you would find Google, Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so on. So here we have the applications. So let's focus now a bit on cybersecurity. And it's very important to define what is meant with cybersecurity. When we talk about basically cybersecurity forms how do you say that, a part of much bigger discussions going on globally. When we talk about internet governance, this is a much higher level of discussions taking place. And generally speaking, we are looking at 7 areas. So when we talk about internet governance, we are looking at 7 areas. We are looking at, for example, the telecommunication infrastructure. So we are looking at legal discussions. We are looking at the economic aspect. How can we use the internet to conduct some businesses? And I believe this is very important because most of us are using the internet just to search as a use the internet to generate some money or do some businesses. If you look at developed countries, Europe, USA, etc., this is basically what they're using the internet for. They're not using the internet just to Google or just to Facebook, you know, all these kinds of I would not say nonsense, but these kinds of discussions that we are seeing on Facebook, etc., etc. So they use the internet. How can we conduct some businesses? Other discussions going on with respect to internet governance is development. How can we use the internet to develop, let's say, our community? Socio-cultural discussions are also parts of internet governance discussions, and also human rights. How can we facilitate, let's say, that people can have access to the internet, which is one, if you look at basically we as human beings, we do have some basic rights. And if people don't have, let's say, access to given information, that could also be considered lack of basic human rights. So here we have also these discussions going on. And finally, we also have discussions going on right now with respect to security. If you look back just a few years ago, we were not really focusing on these 2 last areas, human rights and cybersecurity. But it's only the last few years that we have started to focus much more on human rights and also security. There are a lot of this definition with respect to cybersecurity, but we can use this as a point of departure. Cybersecurity refers to preventive methods to protect information from being stolen, compromised, or attacked in some other way. So we see information being stolen, compromised, or attacked in some other way. And it's very important when we talk about cybersecurity that we classify, let's say, issues that we are talking about. The first one is what we call a type of action. So here we take a look at the type of action that is taking place. For example, data interception, interference, illegal access, spyware, sabotage, denial of service, identity theft, etc., etc. So here we take a look at type of action. The second one is what we call a type of perpetrator. So here we take a look at the human being committing the act. We can define them as criminals, anarchists, hackers. And I was just commenting with Bevel a while ago. Last week I was in Jamaica at a cybersecurity event, and they had a whole discussion with respect to ethical hackers, because one of the persons in the audience asked about whether or not we can be ethical hackers. And it seems like globally you have some people that, let's say, back then were ethical, but on the long run they became unethical. So there are some discussions, but on the other way around, you have also those who, given that we are in this environment, that got converted, from being, let's say, unethical to become ethical. So just for you to take into consideration, there are some discussions. Maybe you would like to train this person to become ethical, but at the end of the day, you cannot see his or her real intentions. So just detail that we need to take into consideration. You have those what they call terrorists, secret services, defense, military, and I did put also some governments, because you may have some governments that are also can be classified in this group. Basically, they're using the same tools that others are using to, let's say, to hack or to prevent their citizens' access to the internet. And the last type is the type of target. So you may have individuals, just people like you and me, private companies, civil society organizations, media, public institutions, and nowadays critical infrastructure. That's very, very important. So again, we take a look at the type of action, type of perpetrator, and the type of target. So this is the way how we can classify or map what we call cybersecurity challenges. It's stuck again. Okay, just touch it with your hand, please. For me. Just the next button, next. Can you just use the arrow, the next one? I think there's someone in this room trying to hack me, right? Okay. So when we talk about cyber security, basically technical aspects, they are important, but most importantly is what we call the economic impact. And Bevel already did mention it. If you look, for example, in Jamaica in 2016, they lost more than 100 million US dollars based on cybercrime. And this is basically what was reported. So we're not even sure that these are the correct numbers, but this is what was reported. And this gentleman sitting there, that's Trevor Forrest from the he's a special advisor to the government in Jamaica. So if you talk about these things, so there is no reason for us not to believe that that is true. If you look globally, also we have seen within insurance companies, for example, $450 billion were, let's say, lost due to cyber crime activities. And also we are seeing the same threats in Latin America as well. So I'm just talking now about Latin America and the Caribbean, not to mention other parts of the world. And in addition to the economic, let's say, impact, we have some social impact as well. Right now, you have more than 1 million of victims per day when it comes to cyber crime activities. And this is much more than the number of babies that are born, newborn babies. So 1 million of victims a day. We have seen also, for example, 589, so almost 600 million of people affected with respect to cybercrime. This is much more than the number of people living in the US and Canada altogether. So we see this has a very big social impact when it comes to cybercrime. So let's take now a look at let's say the threats that we're seeing nowadays in a more, let's say, structural way. So the first one that we are seeing is what we call the malicious software, malware. Whenever you have a given software, malware stands for malicious software or unwanted software. Whenever you have a given software installed on your system and neither you nor your system administrator did install that software, that we can already start to assume we are talking here about malicious software. And there are a few forms. We have, let's see, what we call the virus. We have the Trojan, and we have also the worm. And another development that we are seeing nowadays, but this is just a malicious software, is what we call the ransomware. Remember, hackers are becoming much more smarter, and they are well organized, as Bevel did mention this morning. They have the skills, they have the resources, they are well trained, and he didn't mention that, but in a given country, I'm not going to mention that country because I think he already mentioned it. You may, not you may have, most of these hackers, most of them, let's say, have PhD degrees in computer engineering. So most of them. Then you may find a few that have, let's say, master degrees in computer engineering, and just maybe one or two with bachelor degrees in computer engineering. So it's a very difficult task to fight against these people because they are well trained, they have the resources, they have the skills, they have everything, and they have the knowledge. And the only thing that they don't have is they don't have a job, and they have plenty of time to think how can they use their skills to do what they are doing. Again, I'm not going to focus on one particular country, but from that particular country, I have good friends there as well. I was just in Jamaica last week with one of them. It's a good friend. But this is the reality. And they are becoming smarter. You know, back then, I mean, um, someone maybe committing an act, a crime, would go to the bank, try to rob a bank, you know. But nowadays, people aren't doing these kind of things because the police can kill you, you know. I mean, you have cameras all over the place. They're looking who is that guy committing, a girl nowadays as well, committing that crime. So it's much easier just to use your skills without going to the bank or other, let's say, institutions to get that money without going to the bank. And this is what basically they're doing. Nowadays, data it's being considered, let's say, the new oil, and it has a value. It has a value. So if I can keep your data, let's say, hostage, and if it's valuable to you, then you're able to pay a few dollars, let's say, to get it back. So that's the new strategy. I'm just holding your data hostage, and it's valuable to you. So if you want it back, you will pay me something, right? So that's the whole ransomware era that we are seeing nowadays. Another threat that we are seeing, and I think this one is it could be even, or let me put it like this, it's very difficult, dangerous, this one as well. This one is what we call the botnets. So you may have someone within your network and you don't know that he or she is within your house. For me, that's a more scary thing, right? Because if you see, for example, at the malware, you see, okay, I have a challenge. I cannot get access to my data. But what about if you have a stranger in your house and you don't know that? And that particular stranger has been there for years. It's a very scary thing. Just look at real life. You and your wife in your house and you have a stranger there and you don't know that this guy or girl is in that particular in your in-house. So botnets, that's the other threats that we are seeing nowadays. We have also what we call the denial of service. And if it is more in a distributed form, then we call it a distributed denial of a service. Basically, you guys also can commit a denial of service on my person. If I'm talking right now as a non, as Bevel mentioned it, I guess, no, he didn't mention it. The moderator mentioned it. As a non-English speaker, non-native English speaker, let's put it like that. And all of you guys started to ask me questions. It will become very difficult for me to answer. And this is exactly what is being done with denial of service. So flooding a computer or system or website with requests for information preventing them functioning properly. This is, and there are a few reasons why people are committing, let's say, that. I'll mention them. For example, you have the later on Albert Daniels from ICANN. He will be talking about the domain name system. But in a nutshell, what does the domain system do? Basically, we as human beings, we are using names to contact or to talk or to be in contact with each other. For example, Daniels, that's a name. But computer systems don't really understand names. They use what we call IP addresses. So ICANN is the global organization that is coordinating in order for all these names to match with relevant IP addresses. Because if you can access, let's say, a given, if you know a given IP address, then you can also reach that domain name. Domain name is just a fake thing that we as human beings are using. But the real resource that we need to use, that's what we call the IP address. So ICANN is coordinating that on the global level. A few years ago, I think it was 2008 when I was at ICANN, back then we had such a, or people tried to attack, let's say, the DNS with it was called back then the configure, the configure, yes, in 2008. And it was, the focus was more back then on what we call the country code top level domain names. So you may have, let's say, what we call the generic top level domain names like the .coms, .org, .int, etc., etc. But you have also, let's say, local domain names. What is the local domain name of St. Vincent and the Grenadines? VC, okay. So that's a country code top level domain name. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, that's tt.tt, for example. So there are a few reasons why people are doing this. Some of them just for fun, to show you, okay, you have this big organization and we would like to show you that we can break that system. That's for maybe fun. But nowadays, it's more for business as well, as we have seen, for example, with the ransomware. It's not only for fun, but more as a business. We have seen, for example, the denial of service attacks on web servers, where you have all the relevant internet data allocated. Credit cards. My credit card, or my corporate credit card, was just hacked in September when I was in Uruguay. And just last week, it was hacked again when I was in a Caribbean island. I'm not going to mention the name of the country. So these are things that are being done on a daily basis. And we see also another reason, which is activism. So people are against a given system or government or whatever, and they are trying to show you that we can break that system and then commit what we call a denial of service attack. One of the other ones that I think was mentioned also this morning is phishing. And here we see social engineering. My good friend over here asked about this. And basically, phishing is basically social engineering engineering, because at the end of the day, you are the one that are just giving your information away to that particular person who is asking it. Of course, he's trying to trick you in one or other way, but at the end of the day, you are the one that is giving them away your information. So phishing is another threat that we are seeing. And here are a few examples how we can real life examples of phishing. E-scams. There is also in the Caribbean, again, I'm not going to mention country, but in a given area of one very nice Caribbean island, I didn't mention anything. Okay, so that area is well known for their e-scammers. And basically what we have seen in that particular country, till a few years ago, they were not really talking about cybersecurity until the email of one of the ministers was hacked, and then they've started to focus a lot on cybersecurity. So e-scams is one of the other threats that we're seeing, and you may get them in all kinds of forms, but at the end of the day, it's just an e-scam. Now, I would like to focus now a bit more on a message of hope, because what we have seen this morning, this seems very scary, right? When we are talking about cybersecurity, but there is hope as well. If we follow, let's say, a given path, then we can, let's say, at least address, let's say, some cybersecurity challenges that we are facing nowadays. Given that, let's say, cybersecurity is so broad, it's very important and useful if we can break all these challenges into small pieces. Normally, you can use these eight pieces of areas to focus on cybersecurity challenges. I will mention them. We need to secure what we call the link. I'll explain what it is. We need to secure the telecommunication infrastructure. We need to secure the internet itself. We need to secure the computers or smart devices that we're using. We need to secure the applications. We need to secure data, identity, and finally, essential services. Securing the link. What is the link? Back then, when the internet was developed, remember it was developed in a closed group environment. And you had people who trusted each other, so there was no need to focus on security. That is why the internet, if you look at its infrastructure, it doesn't have any security mechanism, if you look at the link, embedded into it. It's like if I'm living on an island, only the two of us, my wife and myself, for example, there is no need for me to put any lock on the front door, right? Because I see some strange faces here. If it is the only two of us living on that island, why should I put any lock on the front door of my house? Or is here in St. Vincent something else? I don't know. There is no need to do that. Okay. But if the possibility is there that a third person, for example, okay, I would not use Bevel. Let me use Albert Daniels. If I know, for example, that Albert too can have, let's say, access to to the island, then I'll put a lock on my front door. That's just to save my marriage, right? Okay, so this is the same thing with the internet as well. It didn't have any security mechanism embedded into it, but given that nowadays we have others that also are using the internet, we need to secure the link. And with securing the link, basically what we're trying to do, we are not taking the threat away. If you look, for example, here, you still have the sharks around. You still have the Albert Daniels maybe around. But what we're going to do is to secure ourselves, put ourselves in a given environment that it is impossible for him or her to, let's say, have access to our house. You see here, basically the sharks, they are still there. The threats are still there, but they don't have access to those that are in that closed and secure environment. And this is all what we are using, for example, encryption. Encryption is all about the threat will continue to be there, but we are going to, let's say, create a tunnel around, let's say, the data that we like to protect. And there are a few ways how we can do this. Those of you who are a bit more technical. We can, let's say, encrypt on what we call on the data layer. And then here we have a few ways how we can do that. MACsec, Wi-Fi protected access, etc. We can encrypt on the IP layer with IPsec, and we can encrypt also on the application layer. But what you need to remember with encryption, what we are doing is just to put a tunnel around, let's say, the data, and the threat will continue to be there, but we will be in a safe environment. We need to secure telecommunication infrastructure. This is one area that most of the times, especially when we're talking about the internet, we are not focusing much on the telecommunication infrastructure. But remember, without telecommunication infrastructure, you cannot have internet access neither. You need to have a telecommunication infrastructure, be it wired, wireless, satellite communication. You need to have a telecommunication infrastructure in order for us to have, let's say, internet. Sometimes in other countries, this is not St. Vincent, of course, you can just walk around and touch, let's say, all these telecommunication cables. What about if someone would like to commit sabotage? It's very easy. While we are trying to protect our data, but very easy, someone can just cut that cable and commit sabotage in that particular country. So we need to find ways how to protect or to secure telecommunication infrastructure. We need to secure the internet itself. And when I'm talking about the internet, I'm not talking about Facebook, I'm not talking about Google, I'm not talking about Twitter. I'm talking about the names, the domain names, and I'm talking about the routes that we are using. Because basically, two main areas we are seeing within the internet. You have the names, the apollo.com, for example, the bevel.tt, albert.lc. So these are the domain names. We need to find ways how to protect them. But we have also routes that are being used in order for the traffic to be transported from one area to the other. That's the way how the internet functions. So we have the names and we have the routes. So we need to protect the routes as well. And there are two technologies out there that can be used. I think Albert will talk about DNSSEC later on, I guess, from ICANN. These are the two technologies that we have nowadays to protect, let's say, the names. Then we have the domain name system with security extension. It's called DNSSEC. And we have also the RPKI, Research Public Key Infrastructure. This is being used in order for us to protect the routes. So the names and the routes need to be protected. And by doing so, then we are ensured that we did protect, for example, the internet infrastructure. We need to protect or secure, let's say, our computer smart devices. This is straightforward. We are using devices. On our devices, we have data, and we need to protect the devices in order for people not to get access to our valuable data. That's the reason why we need to protect, let's say, our smart devices. Okay. There are two ways. You may have, for example, the firewall. That's the first one. In order to prevent people to have access to your machine, you can use, let's say, firewalls. And the second one is the applications that we are using. So you can use all kinds of anti-malware and anti-virus application and so on and so on. So the focus, protect your machine, the hardware, and also the applications that we are running on our machines. If you take a look, for example, nowadays, in just 1 minute, you can get a better understanding what is going on. For example, in just 1 minute, you have 2.4 million of Google searches. You have um, 20.6 million WhatsApp sent. You have, and we're talking just about 1 minute. You have 203,000, let's say, dollars being generated or minute, and we have some other examples. So here we have a lot of applications. All these are applications that are being used globally. So we need to find ways how to protect them. Or the owners of these applications, they need to find a way how to protect their applications. If you just take a look at one application that we are using, or most of us are using, are still are using, is the what we call electronic emails. That you know, for example, that 90% of emails are just spam. And that is why we need to use, let's say, spam filters to protect ourselves against all these spams that we are receiving on a daily basis. And we need also to protect, let's say, web applications using, for example, web application firewalls. This is just one example, but all the other, let's say, examples that I did mention, all the other applications, all of them, they need to find a way or the other to protect their particular application. And data. Data is nowadays is the new oil. Data is money, data is everything. And that is why all these malware attacks are focusing on getting your data. And we can use, let's say, the same examples that I did mention before, but also encryption, which is very important to secure your data. Another aspect that we need to focus on is to secure your identity. Whenever you go to a website on the internet, you leave traces behind. And this is something very important that we need to take into consideration. This is the way how, for example, law enforcement agencies can trace back one particular person, what he or she has been doing on the internet. And in addition to leaving, let's say, traces over the internet, we are also giving away, let's say, our identity in a very easy way. If you see what people are posting on Facebook with all details, I'm going now to St. Vincent. I'll be there till Saturday, for example. And the week after, I'll be in Geneva. All details. And still, we are asking ourselves, how did they break into our house when we were not at home? We gave them all information. They know everything. And all these smart search engines, they know what we are doing. They know the websites that we are visiting. And based on that, with very intelligent, let's say, programs, they can start offering you, giving you some offers with respect to what you have been looking at. Like to buy a new car, for example, and they know you have been visiting all these websites of all these cars. Given that they already have a profile of this particular person, they know what kind of car they can offer this guy or girl. For example, if I would like to buy a new car, I'm sure I will get offers from maybe Toyota or Hyundai. But if Apollo would like to buy a new car, a Mercedes, a BMW, you know, because they already have a profile created from this particular person. And basically, we are the ones that gave them all information needed. So again, this is a very scary world, but there is hope. But we need to protect ourselves. Um, and one of the very important areas nowadays is also, let's say, privacy, especially when it comes to the Internet of Things. We are not going to focus on it in this symposium, but just imagine what would happen with all these devices, let's say, connected to the Internet, if they start to collect information about you. You know, so we just and whenever you connect a given device to the Internet, it becomes part of the global Internet. So it's not when you have a smart TV, it's not you watching the TV. The TV can be watching you as well. You understand? So whenever we connect a given device to the Internet, it becomes part of the global Internet. And that is why privacy is very important when it comes to Internet of Things. And finally, we need to protect what we call essential services. Each country should decide for themselves what is essential services to them. I think most of us would agree, especially in the Caribbean, electricity and water, and sometimes gas as well. It depends the system. These are essential services. So we need to find ways how to protect these. And if you are in a more financial environment like Barbados, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, Curacao as well, well, that this is just a side talk. Did you know, for example, that I'm not sure. Yes, I'm from Curacao, so I'm mentioning it. Did you know that the offshore business was developed in Curacao? It was developed by a very smart lawyer and economist. So this guy had those two skills. He was a lawyer and he was an economist. And you know how it goes with lawyers. They know exactly how to find all these loopholes, right? And you know, when you have the skills, you understand the business of money. So he combined these two skills and he developed this whole offshore concept. And at a given moment in time, Curacao started to make a lot of money with offshore, and other countries, given that Curacao is still part of the Dutch kingdom, and with the US, they decide, okay, this small country cannot continue doing this thing. So they put some locks on it in with another shape. But in any case, still we are seeing a lot of financial sector with businesses going on in the Caribbean. So we need to find ways how to protect this. So with that, I think I did cover most of the threats and opportunities that we're seeing. At Internet Society, for example, global, we believe in what we call the collaborative security approach. And I think Bevel did mention that in his presentation. When we talk about Internet Society, about cybersecurity, all of us need to work together. So this is not a challenge or a problem that only one organization or one country can solve. All of us, governments, business community, academia, all of us need to come together to see how we can address the challenges. And if we do that, using, for example, the 8 areas that I did focus on, I think we can use that as a good point of departure. With that, I thank you very much. Sorry, I just got it.
All right. Let's put our hands together again for Mr. Osepa. Cybersecurity is increasingly in the news and is quickly becoming a top concern for individuals and businesses. And we just got a very good idea why. Anyone with questions for Mr. Osepa? I see your hand is up, and let's get the mic across to you. Mr. Osapa, can you come back to the podium, please?
My question is, there's a lot of policies being implemented in this day and age to combat and to regulate the internet and cybersecurity, right? How effective are they? And do they normally include the technical persons?
When just a point of clarification, especially within the internet environment, use the word coordinate and not really regulate. You have two worlds. Basically, you have the old traditional telecommunications world based on the PSTN, etc., etc. So that was a very regulated environment. When it comes to the internet, it's a more, let's say, open environment. You don't need to request, let's say, permission to innovate. That is why we call it a permissionless innovation approach. Just imagine, for example, what would happen with, what is the guy's name? Zuckerberg from Facebook. Just imagine what would happen. He had this magnificent idea, and he had to go to the regulator asking them, okay, what do you think of this Facebook thing? Do you think it's feasible? You know? And I used to work at the regulator as well, and I know exactly how it goes. We are going to look at the business case, business model, you know, or business plan, you know. And at the end of the day, given that you didn't conduct any business yourself, how are you going to judge this guy? You know, but okay, that's just a side discussion. So coming back to your question, we are seeing and we are focusing on coordination. It's not regulation, it's coordination. And when it comes to coordination, basically the internet is based on what we call the multi, depending on what version of English you use. I had to learn these things as a non-native English speaker. We are using the multi-stakeholder model. So in this model, you have all stakeholders working together. You have the governments, you have the business community, you have the academia, and you have the civil society. So each one of them are on equal footing. Within, let's say, the old traditional, let's say, telecommunication environment based on United Nations, let's say, point of departure, you would see that only, let's say, governments have a say. So I didn't have the chance to focus on that right now because that was not the aim of my presentation. But that's the main difference. So coordination. And we are seeing coordination. If you look, for example, in the Caribbean Telecommunication Union, CTU, this is one of the things that they are doing. They are coordinating with all stakeholders within the Caribbean. And in wider Latin America, we are seeing that as well. So that's taking place. And sorry for the very long answer. And what was the second one that I didn't catch?
Second one?
Oh, yes. You forgot?
Yeah. But how effective is it?
How effective it is? It's based on how effective we would like it to be. Because if we, as I did mention, for example, I'm sure CTU's, let's say, approach, because we have been working with them for so long, it has been very successful. You know, put all stakeholders together, talk to them, and listen to them. And it's not like one-way direction. Governments are going to decide this is the way how it should go, but we are listening to all stakeholders, and based on that, we will decide what is best for the in this particular case, to the internet sector. So it has been very effective. Yes.
When you say government, you're talking about the state government, or you're talking about the government in the particular company?
Governments in a given country, those who are elected by the locals in a given country.
Because when I made mention to government, maybe I should have specified. I mentioned it could be the state government, but it could also be the government or the IT government within an organization. Because I was reading an article, a paper, a couple of weeks ago, and it says that there's a great divide between what the policies that are implemented and the persons who are responsible for the cybersecurity mitigation in a company. That being said, in terms of, they said policies, but those policies also complicate how the technical staff are able to mitigate the risks and the attacks of cybersecurity.
Yes, because this is because we haven't been focusing on coordination. If you have a coordinated environment where governments, let's say, talk to all stakeholders in their particular jurisdiction, then for sure we'll avoid these kind of things. But if you have in a closed group environments, governments deciding, okay, this is the way it should go, then we will be having these challenges. So that is why we are focusing on coordination. Coordination, get all people together in a room. Let's talk about the challenge that we're facing, and let's see how together we can solve that challenge.
Question. Oh, Sion Samuel is my name. At Village. Just an advice I'm seeking. Currently, I'm working on an online marketing platform which relates to membership. It's basically gathering information from persons that we're developing. Well, it have already been worked on, the matter of marketing. Yes, so we have, it's secure, SSL certified, and HTTPS, and we have a privacy policy. But all the persons are given to us when they log in, they use a Facebook to log in, they use a Gmail, but all we have in from them is just the email address and the numbers, phone numbers. How or what best advice would you give me or us as we go forward?
Look, I think this is exactly what we're trying to do with these kind of gatherings. Right here in this room, we have some people who have been, Stephen Lee, I'm looking your direction. Right here in this room, and also Bavel Wooding, but I'm focusing a bit more now on Stephen Lee. We have people who have been doing these kind of businesses, or if they haven't, they have contact with all these people who have been doing this kind of businesses. So it's not for you to develop the wheel from scratch because they have been doing it. And I would like to advise you, maybe when we have the break, talk to him. And he has contacts, I'm sure, with people who I can give you, for example, some ideas, but this guy has been doing it. So it's better just to talk with him. Okay? Need to break, right?
Albert Daniels, ICANN. I just want to say, without going into big detail, that this is a very brave man because he said, if I recall correctly, that he's using SSL and there's HTTPS, so his site is secure. We can talk about that a little bit more later on because I would not completely agree with you that simply because you're using SSL and HTTP.
Basically, in his presentation, so on DNSSEC, he will be talking on these things. Okay? So thank you very much.
All right, let's put our hands together again for Mr. Sefa. At this time, we're going to move swiftly. Into our next section, final section for the morning, a panel discussion on cyber siege. What you need to know about cybersecurity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You'll notice that we're going to be having local and regional panelists. This morning, allow me to start with our local panelists. First up, we're going to invite Mr. Apollo Knights to join us here, who serves currently as the director of NTRC. Put your hands together for him. Secondly, we have Mr. Caswellon Duncan, who's the network admin for the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning, Sustainable Development, and Information, Communication, and Technology. Put your hands together for him. And encourage them to come straight to the front where they will sit at the table. Continuing with our other participants, those who are regional panelists, we have first Mr. Stephen Lee, who's the CEO of Architect Inc. and the program director at Carib Knob. Put your hands together for Mr. Stephen Lee. And finally, this morning, acting as a participating moderator, Mr. Albert Daniels, who is a stakeholder engagement and a senior manager at the Caribbean. Put your hands together for our participants on this panel discussion.
On the program. Show you on this way.
Like this. Roxanne, how much time do we have for the panel?
You going first?
20 minutes. Okay. All right. Thanks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the introduction of our very distinguished panel, which will be primarily looking at this issue of cybersecurity from a local perspective. And of course, we have Stephen Lee, who's as a Caribbean and local man as any of the other two gentlemen at this table, given the work that he's been doing with Carib Knob. The first thing that I'd like to do is perhaps invite the three panelists, two? Just for the time being? Okay. Okay, so I'll invite the two local panelists to just give a brief 2-minute overview of what they have been seeing with regard to cybersecurity incidents in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Of course, we have Apollo, who is very well known with regard to his work at the NTRC, and I'm sure that our friend from the Ministry of Finance, who's the IT administrator, has, some, I see him looking all excited, giving thought to how much he's going to be sharing with us. But give us a sense of what you've been seeing directly here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Very short, before we get into the discussion.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Caswell and Duncan. Cybersecurity. The world is changing. And in some contexts, faster than in others. When I went to school, I had a computer, I used to wait half an hour to see it boot. I never knew what a cell phone is. We didn't have laptops. Today, our children have everything. Long ago, people used to go to a bank with guns and cutlass, tool up the bank and rip off the windows. Today, you can be robbed by virtually anyone from anywhere. The information technology landscape is changing very fast. And keeping up with the type of threats and vulnerabilities that we encounter on a daily basis is a challenge. What I find is even more challenging is keeping our people aware. Keeping our people aware. Now, some of the issues I can talk about openly and some I can't talk about. But we have had incidents where, for instance, our websites have been hacked. We have had incidents where people's emails have been hacked, but we host the government email. We have seen hundreds of millions attempts at brute force at our firewalls, at our email services. We have worked along with the police in solving some of these incidences, or but criminals are smart. I have seen one instance where somebody attempted to break a supermarket. There's a security system there, but the person just in garbage bag from head to foot. So even though you see somebody's robbing, the recognition. Yeah. From a government perspective, government has been doing a lot in terms of training and making resources aware. We have the ICT roadshow, that's championed by the CTU. We have the Girls in ICT. We have a whole bunch of incubator programs and so on that we try to start up and so on about the country and so on. And at the ITSD, with the attempt to bridge the gap between government and the public, putting systems in place to ensure that government is less insular and making the data available out there and so on. We have been doing our own part. Yeah. And we go about we anyway plus industry with whatever cybersecurity incidents that they may encounter.
Okay, so the main point I got from what you've been saying is that the threats exist and the attacks have been taking place. And you gave one or two examples, because I think one of the points of this whole session was to be clear that we are not in this utopian situation where everybody else in bigger countries, in more developed countries, are being attacked. But because of the very nature and the very ease with which international entities can attack our systems, we are in a situation, and to be honest, we have been for many, many years, where we are being attacked at the government level, at private sector level, by persons wishing to gain access to our systems. Apollo, would you like to make a brief comment along those lines?
Yes, good morning. Well, I think we are asking to see for me to mention what I'm seeing. I mean, I'm not in the position like Mr. Duncan, who might be more involved. I'm more like an outsider like you guys, I think. Most of you guys are outsiders. So I'm more on the outside looking in. So what I'm seeing is more like what you have been seeing, which includes the ATM scams. I was just seeing this morning on social media and Facebook where the sentencing for the 3 persons from St. Lucia will be happening maybe soon. That happened already this year, where they was able to hit a number of personal accounts through the ATMs. I mean, we're seeing that.
These are St. Lucia nationals?
Yeah, St. Lucia nationals in St. Vincent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They got converted after they got to St. Vincent, maybe.
Yeah, they came. Remember, we were very close. We share a seaboard, and they came by boat. They not clear our customs now. The criminals don't use our normal systems. They use their own systems. So they came by boat. They didn't clear any customs entries, and they did some work, I think, only this year. Right? I'm also seeing the social hacks, and especially like the social media. I mean, hacking persons' identities, people posting, getting their accounts stolen. That's the common stuff we're seeing. And we've also been seeing the email hacks. I see that all of them are my friends. It haven't happened to me as yet, but maybe as the FBI directors mentioned, I guess it will happen sometime in the future. All right. So I'm seeing where a number of entities now are asking to have better design passwords as compared to the 1, 2, 3 mentioned by Bevel. So now the one you have one with a cap, a number, some letters mixed up, which you have to do. I'm also seeing where some of the banks I will mention, they're giving you a little thing on a little chain to press to get some codes that you have to push in when you enter online. So you have like a two-tier identity check. I'm still trying to think of how that works, if the code's already built in or it syncs over time. So I mean, maybe one of those techie guys can tell me how that works. So maybe if the person is able to hack all those codes ahead of time, and then you can get into your account. What I also like to touch on is maybe what we not seeing much of in the islands. So everybody's seeing certain things. What I'm not seeing is that we need and not seeing enough education in cybersecurity. So I think we need to do more of that. And I think that's where ISOC SPG comes in. I think they have been doing some of that already in their short existence. And this is part of it as well. And they will continue in that area. I think we also need a national CERT, which is Computer Incident Response Team. And that's where, right now, persons have a problem and they go to the police. They say the police send you somewhere else. People need to know where to go to when they have these cybersecurity issues. And CERT plays a big role in that. I think we need to work on that. And I'm also very fearful what is to come. Right, in the future. I don't think things will get any better. They will get worse going forward, especially as we move into things like artificial intelligence. See, instead of persons hacking us, we'll see computers maybe hacking us and doing all kinds of things that we don't imagine in the future. So those are the things that might scare me a little bit. But just to mention, I mean, we've been doing a few things on a local level. From an NTRC standpoint where I work at, we were instrumental in establishing the associate degree program in cybersecurity. Some of the students here today with us, and they're more or less the guinea pigs. They'll be the first. They're the first cohort. We graduated, I think, in May, and it's a continuing program. And we hope them that they'll get employment when they finish, or maybe start their own businesses and contribute in the work we have to do together. As we have mentioned, we have to work together both locally and in the region on this great issue. So that's
okay. So the problem is there. The reality that we are hearing is that the problem exists, and we've heard that certain steps are being taken both at the level of the education and at the level of the government to try to address this problem. Just by a show of hands, how many technical people do we have in the audience? Persons who are IT managers, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are a few of them, okay. So in that case, I want to quickly switch to Stephen Lee from CARBNOG and to tell us a little bit about what CARBNOG is and specifically what CARBNOG has been doing in other territories within the Caribbean region to deal with this whole reality of the cyber attacks and the cyber threats.
Right, thanks, Albert. Right, so CARBNOG is a Caribbean network community that was formed in 2007 and operates in pretty much the same way as other network operator groups around the world. For example, in the US, we have NANOG. In Latin America, there's LACNOG. In Europe, you have RIPE, and so on. So various regions around the world have what are called network operator groups, which is that coordinate together, work together to help build out technical capacity within the region. And the Caribbean has that in CARBNOG. And it's been involved over the last 10 years in basically training, education, capacity building through regional meetings and interventions like this. So this event would be joint between ISOC and CARBNOG and ARIN and so on. So these are the kinds of events in which CARBNOG would play a part in training and in just helping to connect people together. And security, as I mentioned this morning, has been a pretty major concern of the group over the last few years. It has pretty much always been on the agenda, but recently, with the rise of access to technology and cloud computing and AI and so on, the whole issue of cybersecurity has become much more significant. And what we is, while we have focus on legal frameworks and coordination and so on, CARBNOG is very interested in training those very technical operators inside a room like this on real hard skills, securing servers and working with firewall rules. We're talking about really practical things. that a network administrator or somebody who is responsible for transmission on the mobile network and so on can learn the skills and processes and practical things to make sure that those networks secure. And we're talking about password, multi-factor authentication, the whole gamut of issues related to and preventing attacks, preventing denial of service attacks, different techniques and so on. Apollo just mentioned the CSERT, and that's a part of the focus of CARBNOG. And in fact, I'll be talking about that after lunch. There's the need to have a much better approach to coordinating responses to incidents and protecting ourselves from incidents. Caswallon spoke about helping other departments and so on, and going around and addressing things. And I'm sure, I'd bet that a lot of the IT persons here, when they work on their networks, are largely working alone in a highly coordinated way with other departments, with other companies or whatever. That's something that we see a lot across the Caribbean. Really hardworking, technically strong, and so on people. My problem right now, and that's something that we want to see if we can move beyond that and start to have much more coordinated responses to the environment.
Okay, so it's all well and good, to speak generally about the problems of cybersecurity and the impact that it can have, and so on. But what I'd like to do now is to drill down a little bit more and sort of bring it home. Where we talk for a little while about the impact that perhaps some of these attacks may be having financially here in St. Vincent, maybe. And I'd first like to hear, from Mr. Duncan and Apollo with regard to their sense or any data that they may have with regard to the impact of some of these attacks locally. And then perhaps we can switch quickly to Stephen to hear some of what he is seeing from a sort of outsider looking in the Caribbean region generally. So perhaps, Mr. Duncan, if you can speak a little bit more about the impact, because, we come to this, workshop and we say all these nice things. We talk about structures generally, but what impact have you been seeing that some of these cybersecurity issues has been having locally here in St. Vincent?
Well, in some cases, I can say we have been seriously impacted. Some of the cases I would not be able to talk about because we sensitivity of the nature of some of these things. But within recent time, we had to deal with an attack at a ministry where we would have lost financially. Suffice to just say that alone, you know what I mean? The other thing is that at the Ministry of Finance some time ago, we had an issue with the shortcut virus. This shortcut virus caused you to lose every single thing, you know what I mean? We run a Zim email system. There have been cases where, for instance, sometimes all 200 users maybe sometimes might get locked out because of whatever, And there's one time we tried to set up this web portal. It was contracted and so on. We had locals working with it and so on. Today we put into production, and the very night of that day, it got hacked. You know what I mean? You see, sometimes people forget that a whole thing is made up of smaller components. And some of the vulnerabilities of the whole thing, depend on the vulnerabilities of the individual pieces. I heard my friend Sion mention a while ago, he said, his thing is secure. I have a philosophy. Things are only secure from the people who don't know. And there's always somebody who knows. My brother here, Stephen, he mentioned about all these things about the advent of cloud computing and things being stored in the cloud. I happen to have done a master's thesis at the University of Liverpool on the impact of cloud computing on the Eastern Caribbean. You see, people normally come in the marketing stuff. They don't really tell you the risk. You know what I mean? In the Caribbean, we have a particular context in that we were colonies and new colonies of another people. And for us to be truly sustainable, we have to find a type of development, banana going out, all this kind of stuff, that develops from within, where we can bring our people to the standard of education and training and expertise, where we can respond to these threats. You understand me? Everything online. We have our health information system. We have our MPID. We have our taxes online. You get me? Just now we have an e-document management system. We're setting up a public infrastructure and so on. Everything is going online. Now, how do we protect that?
And perhaps maybe that's a good segue to get a comment from Apollo. What I would like to ask Apollo is, how does the regulator look at this kind of evolving situation, this kind of evolving e-society? All in all of this, does the regulator get involved at all? Does the regulator only get involved if the community says to the regulator that they should do something? On all of this?
Well, boss, as a regulator, we're regulated for telecommunications, but we're not the ones who deal with the Cybercrime Act now. The Cybercrime Act came in, I think it was last year. I mean, the best of my knowledge, I think the police is the one who has jurisdiction on the act. So we were not involved from that aspect of it. Now, when issues like content issues, which sometimes have cybersecurity related aspects to it, the Telecom Act as well does not deal with the content stuff. And it's an issue within all the 5 hectare countries. Content more or less is not regulated by anyone. So that is another loophole that we need to look at, right? Touch a little on the experiences from a cybersecurity issue, more or less in detail. As an organization at the NTRC, we, I guess, more or less fall into the one that has not been hit as yet, I think. Well, I said, unless you don't know. I mean, I only had one experience, I think, maybe a few years ago, where at the time I think could be cyber related. We had a server that has these, we call RAID drives. You have one RAID drive and second supposed to be redundant now. But they all fail, the server fail and all the drives fail at the same time. So all that stuff went, which to me doesn't seem normal, right? But that was happening at the time. So since then we have put in more or less different sites so you can reduce that effect maybe from happening. Now, Caswell, as mentioned, he is someone that don't like the cloud, and he thinks there's all kind of bad things in the cloud, which I believe so as well. But I went to a course at the US Telecom Training Institute a few years ago. They have these one-day courses that are run by different organization entities. And this one dealt with cybercrime issues now, 10 years ago. And the guy who taught the course, he says it was a non-profit organization. Afterwards, I came to the conclusion, I think it was a CIA operation, yeah. So based on the discussions at night, he was one of those guys who hacked into Antigua now. Back in the day, Antigua used to do a lot of online gaming. Right. He was a US citizen. He was able to hack into the system and winning a lot of money. Right? And the feds came for him at some point. And then he said he ended up working with NSA thereafter. So if you notice that stuff. So then he said he got fed up with the NSA, so he left and formed this non-profit. And then he advises banks and his people how to secure the networks. He doesn't work with credit cards. But from speaking to him, and what he said he can do, and the things he can do, is more or less, it makes you wonder if you can really protect your networks, right? So, yeah, that's what I'm finish up there. So the point I'm coming to is that, well, we can do a lot to protect our networks, and we should do that. we also have to be to the extent of what we put on these networks and information-wise. We need to keep something off and separate machines, not on the net, on networks. And that's the concept we have used at the NTRC. We must an open organization. There's not in our networks that we don't think anyone can see or want to see. And we as an organization use a lot of cloud networks and cloud services. So maybe another secure, but for maybe different branches of government and some institutions, I will advise them maybe yes, not to. Right? So an apps we might use or our organization, we would recommend them to be used maybe for government for cabinet level stuff. So that's it.
Okay, before I ask for closing comments, I have to latch onto this particular topic of cloud, because we've heard yes cloud, no cloud. Yeah. And the reality is that the cloud seems to be gaining more and more importance in our everyday lives. I mean, I know people would be using Dropbox for certain things. They're using maybe OneDrive for other things. Our email is all in the cloud. There was a time when maybe the local provider used to have all of your email. Now there's a lot of stuff in the cloud. So I know Stephen is a cloud expert. So before I go one by one to just ask for some 30-second closing comments on this local situation, I'll let Stephen talk a little bit about security in the cloud in 45 seconds to a minute.
In 45 seconds. We're now going to get away from the cloud. So, and it improves efficiency and gets a lot more done in today's world than you could without it. So let's accept that we have to use the cloud and then use it with wisdom and with eyes open. There are things that it's perfectly reason to put on the cloud as is. There are things that you encrypt it and you put it on the cloud. You know, there are certain best practices and approaches to engaging in the cloud, which can be taught and practiced, which can make use of the cloud not as dangerous as it potentially could be if we do it in a more ignorant manner. So.
Okay, so I'll just finally ask each of the panelists to make a sort of closing comment with regard to individual attitudes to cybersecurity. Again, Apollo, Mr. Duncan, based on what you've been seeing in St. Vincent, is there anything that you would like to say with regard to attitudes to cybersecurity in St. Vincent? And of course, Stephen, from a Caribbean perspective, I'll ask you to close off after we've heard from Apollo and Mr. Duncan with regard to this whole issue of attitudes towards cybersecurity. Let's start with Apollo, and then we'll go to Mr.
Well, yes, just to close, I'm saying the social aspect is very important in terms of passwords that is used for different services. Everything on the net now wants a password. So try to use strong passwords. Also, be careful on what you take on your phones, these pictures and so forth. Careful on what you store on them. As if you lose a phone, you can break into it. So just be careful in what you put on a device. So don't think it's secure and nobody can touch it. Have the mindset that you can lose it and somebody can get it at some point in time. So just keep that thought in mind, and I think that will help you a lot in cyberspace.
I think generally we have a false sense of what security really is. And the weakest part of any security system are the people. You understand? The people. And a young lady generally would not show me her leg, but she would go on Facebook and put it there. You know what I mean? You get me? And so we need to have some serious awareness programs. I look at what is happening here right now. For instance, I wish some senior members of government were here at this thing, because at the end of the day, these are the people who make the big decisions. You get me? There's a bridge between the technocrat and the bureaucrat, in the sense that we know what all the problems, we know what the solution is, but feeding it upward to get the solution to come back down is a problem, because they don't understand the issues. Sometimes put a system in place to secure, unless, for instance, you have a firewall and you shun in packages and so on. But John Harry, he gets blocked. His thing has been shown, he gets blocked from the internet. He complains, so I can't do my work. I'm saying to you, sir, something is wrong with the way you're using your computer and your browsing and so on. You get me? Eventually, you say, okay, well, take me off that. Let me go free. You understand me? And if you have one broken window in this room, it's a problem for everybody in this room. You understand me? An open session is an open door. You get me? a vulnerability in any part of this network that is interconnected via fiber optic network, whether it be on the copper network, once it interlinks, you get me? You can gradate, you can scale your permissions, what have you, and you can attack whatever. So I think making our people aware is very, very important, and putting policies in place. Because your operating system and everybody operates in isolation, and there's no policy that governs the way we use things, the way we approach things. You get me? We have a problem. I have what I tend to think, in the absence of balance, there's chaos. One. If you make something too secure, nobody can use it. At the same time, if you make it free for all, it's no good. You get me? So we need to approach it with critical balance. You understand? It's usable, but it is somewhat secure. You understand? And we adapt, because nothing is built in stone. I just attended a World Bank meeting where they tried to push something on our throat, and I was very angry then. You know what I mean? Don't tell me something is secure. Tell me it is unlikely, because something that was impossible 10 years ago is possible today. And something that is possible now will be possible tomorrow, because we learn, we adapt. The only time we will not adapt is when we are dead. And that's what I have to say on that.
Stephen?
What he said. Yeah, so just very short comment that the to share and build up on things that individual ones of us know and leverage it for the community, the better our chances will be to improve over time. So we need to keep doing this.
Okay, so what I think we should have gotten out of this is that, yes, we live on a beautiful Caribbean island, beautiful Grenadines, but the cyber threat is real. It is present, and we've heard some specific examples of the impact that it can actually have. But at the same time, we are in a situation where we need to realize that we need to approach the usage of the new tools that are available to us with balance. We need to pay attention to legislation. We need to pay attention to our attitudes, and there is a lot of work to be done. We are not in a utopia. We are in a very serious situation, but at the same time, we have to go on with our lives. So ladies and gentlemen, I think, it was a short, but it was a very interesting discussion. So I'd like you to thank our three panelists, Apollo, Stephen, and Mr. Duncan. And I now hand back over to our Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you very much. Put your hands together once again for them. Mr. Duncan sure did add a little flair to his closing remarks. I love it. What people won't normally do in real life, they go on the internet, believing that there's some sort of security there, when the reality is that they're just setting up themselves for disaster. Before we break for lunch, I'd like to formally invite everyone who is present and those who are following via the World Wide Web of the Internet Society's official launch this evening at the Flow Wine Bar that's just across the street there, upstairs Subway. All right, we're going to be there from 7:30 p.m. to about 9:30. All right, so the Internet Society St. Vincent and Grenadines chapter, we're going to be having our official launch tonight. Shall I invite you all to stand? I'm just going to whisper a little blessing on the meal, and then we go downstairs and partake. And we want to return here for 20 minutes after 1, where we will go into our next presentation. Just allow me to briefly offer a word of blessing on the meal. Lord, we thank you for an awesome morning where we discuss how vulnerable we are or we can be. Now we pray as we go to lunch that you can bless it, help us to nourish our bodies. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, we have invitations at the back, all right? So if you need to get your invitation to that event tonight, because I believe security is usually tight at Flow.